Okay.
Hello, this is Alex Kapitanakis with Atlas Group, and we're very proud and pleased to have a guest today. Unusual for us, but we have Skylar Rocky Rydell from Texas. He has an international business practice. He's an attorney, and I thought we can talk about some of the topics that I think are important to the United States, to people in the United States, and to us here in Panama.
Yeah.
Rocky, since you refer to yourself as Rocky instead of your name
Yeah,
Skylar.
yeah, it's a little easier.
I wanted to ask you, first of all, a lot of people in the United States have been worried and concerned about money in the banking system. And even though they're concerned about it, they always feel like the safest place in the world is the United States.
Yes.
Can you tell us about a little bit about your knowledge and experience and what you think, how safe is the banking system in the United States?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, that's certainly one of the reasons I ended up here, right? Ended up in Panama and ended up here at Atlas Faults as a client. So, it's the U.S. banking industry and I guess the financial sector as a whole is changing in the United States. In the past, it probably was safest for people overseas, and it was a great place to put money. That is changing, and it has slowly been changing for decades now. The United States now has laws on the book and rules that for civil asset forfeiture, for sanctions and blocking property overseas or even in the United States, and that even goes as far as using the U.S. dollar. If you're a foreigner, you don't even live in the U.S., and you've used the U.S. dollar in a transaction, you could be sanctioned because you use the dollar. So all these little things add up.
And by the way, that affects how banks around the world behave.
Oh,
right?
absolutely, 100%.
Even in where they say Panama is a haven for people, but Panama basically does whatever the U.S. banking laws require them to
Yes,
do.
they actually go above and beyond.
Yeah, in many ways they do, don't
Yes,
they?
yeah.
Like, how long does it take to get a bank account in Panama compared to the U.S.?
At least a week. Probably the quickest is a week.
And many times, if you're an American, you get turned down.
Yes, 100%. And then the difficulty with my wife and I is that I opened the bank account for our Panamanian company, and I wanted to add her on it. And we did that. We went through at least a day of meetings and paperwork with our personal assistant helping us at the bank physically. And they said, "Oh, we'll take care of it."
But the reason is why?
Um,
Is it because Panama is this way, or because they're following
oh, yeah,
they're
yeah.
following the rules of the United States?
Yeah, they're following FATCA, 100%, which is a law in the United States that imposes U.S. regulations on the rest of the world. Basically, for any bank that wants to do business with a bank in the United States, they have to be FATCA compliant and they have to follow U.S. regulations and rules. So for those banks to handle U.S. dollars, for them to be able to transact with other U.S. banks, they're forced into these measures, 100%.
And
100%.
compare that to what happens in the United States. Anybody can come in and open an account.
Yep. Oh yeah, you can get your tax ID number online in like 5 minutes, right, and do anything. Yeah.
So
very, very different.
So what kind of you've had some experiences in the United States as to how the banking system has begun to change and become more corrupted.
Yes.
And more difficult.
Yep. So I'll caveat this. I'm a nobody, basically. I am an international trade attorney. I travel. I have clients overseas. I do business overseas, but I'm U.S. based, U.S. born. I'm not affiliated with any groups or anything, or I'm not political. Obviously I have my own opinions, but I'm not vocal very much in business about it. And I've had unilateral bank closures by my bank where.
When you say bank closures, explain it.
Oh, sure, bank account closures. So I open an
So they
account.
just completely close it down.
Exactly. They send you a letter with a check that said, "We're not doing business with you. Goodbye."
This was an American bank.
Yes, it's a bank that I was with since I was in high school, probably 15. When I guess I got my first job, 14 or 15. So at that point, I had been with it at least 10 years, maybe more.
Did they give you the reason?
No, they won't give me. They will not give you a reason, and that's part of that is a law, is anti-money laundering laws, but also part of that is.
And what were you doing that you think would have caused the bank to close you down?
So at that time, in that business that I had started with some colleagues, we were we're all based in the United States, but we were assisting foreigners in doing due diligence and acquiring U.S. properties. So purchasing real estate, purchasing apartments or commercial buildings, warehouses, all of those we were.
They hired an attorney to help them legally do things under the U.S. law.
Yep. And it's not only just, it wasn't an attorney, it was a real estate agent and consultant, it was a real estate economist who had worked for the U.S. Housing Department. I mean, we were not shady. We were very educated and well. You're
doing everything according to the law and putting it down to and declaring and disclosing what you were doing.
Exactly. And we basically capitalized the account with our startup funds. And within a week, they returned the funds to us and said goodbye. And it was
and they gave you no reason.
Nope. And also, what was irritating is that I think I got the letter a day or maybe 2 days before I left for China for business to go and have some meetings and give a talk. And so the day they closed it, I got this check in the mail, and the check. This isn't too, I hope this isn't too much detail, but on the check they put our business name. And they're like, well, go and take it and deposit it in another account. I'm like, okay, well, I'm leaving the country and there are no other accounts because you are our account. So I asked them, okay, this is the same bank that I banked personally. I said, okay, let me put it in my personal account so at least I have access to it while I'm overseas. And they refused to do that.
A U.S. bank refused to do that, and you were their customer.
Yeah, they knew eventually I went up to a couple levels of bank presidents where they finally did it, but it took an entire day's worth of arguing with them, saying, look, you know who I am, this is my money, you just gave it back to me, but you put the company name on the receipt, or on the check, and I don't have another company account.
So you'd have to start another bank account with the company
else.
Name so you could deposit the check.
Exactly, total nonsense.
And
so...
Now, do you think this is just something that's happening with you, or do you think this is something that's happening across the board in the system?
This has definitely happened to others, and I say others as in other nobodies, people who are not dangerous, people who are not international criminals. This has been ongoing in the firearms industry. Gun shops, gun manufacturers, there are banks who will not do business with them, who will drop them. And that includes credit card processing and bank accounts and things like that. Also, and a more, I guess, in a different sector, it would be, what is it? I guess the human element, like I wouldn't call it human trafficking, I guess, but brothels and whatnot. Sex workers, basically. They've been unbanked as well. I mean, take it as you will. But they're going after people who are easy, right? Who are easily demonized, who are powerless, in a institutional sense.
The people that are abiding by the law.
Yes, yeah.
And when you mentioned gun manufacturers and gun shops.
Yep.
I think you're touching on an interesting new turn of events that is occurring in the U.S. banking system, which is I also believe is worldwide, in the sense that the World Economic Forum, the European Union are all acting in concert with the U.S. The new U.S. system and the new U.S. philosophy, and that's the social rankings,
credit system.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think if they're beginning to punish, and you're now here to talk to us about how you've been punished. And you think that this is a quiet kind of punishment that's basically shutting you down.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It is. It is something that until it happens to you, you're probably not aware of, and you may not know anybody who's experienced. You may not know what to do, but it happens every day. It's happening in increasing numbers. I mean, some of the more public versions that happen to obviously the firearms industry and the sex industry. Also, in Canada, which is not the U.S., but
it's been always almost identical to the U.S.
Yes,
and it follows the U.S. in many ways. And I agree. I know where you're going to go with this.
Taking a leading path.
In Canada, they have taken the lead.
Yes,
you're right.
100%.
But Canada is basically the Democrats' dream environment.
Yes. Yep.
That's their dream world.
Yeah.
what's happened in Canada? What is
Yeah. So yeah, in Canada, if you're watching us, you're probably aware. But for folks who aren't, the Canadian government chose to. Well, I guess yeah, they did choose, but they forced banks to close bank accounts and restrict access and block funds of people who were either supportive of or were, I guess, donating to and things like that to their protest movement they had in the winter. I forget what it was called, the truckers
Yes.
or something. And if you donated money to them, even if you donated when it was still legal, right before they outlawed it, they had accounts blocked, funds frozen, and some for several weeks at a time. Where if you're a working stiff and you donated $50, and this happened, your funds were frozen for a couple weeks. I mean, imagine trying to make rent and trying to buy groceries with your funds, with your account, and that's not possible. That no longer happens. Anything that went into your account is blocked, and you are not allowed to pull anything out at all. So it was a major.
Well, there was
travesty.
there were no due process protections.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Basically, people were taken like as if they were pulled out of their homes in the night.
Yep.
They had their credit closed down. They had their bank accounts closed.
Yep. Yep.
GoFundMe wouldn't work for them.
Yep.
So the interesting issue about that is, first of all, that was all done with U.S. approval.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because the U.S. was directly involved when the Canadian government was acting this way.
Yes.
And the U.S. didn't even object to it.
No.
They were very silent about it.
Yeah. Yep.
And they're actually quite happy that that's being done because they'd like
Yes.
to do it over in the United States.
And it is happening in the United States. It's happening to what would be termed extremists, I guess, is what's called.
Yeah, they call everything extremist that doesn't agree with them.
We all will be extremists eventually. But it's happening to organizations who are either pro strong immigration laws or anti-immigrant maybe, to some on the far right. The one who comes to mind is a website years ago that has been banned repeatedly, and they've actually gone as far as shutting down his bank accounts and also taking away his domains. So and that's a different issue, a little bit different topic, but literally domain registrars and web hosters would steal his domain that he owned and
who is this?
It was a website called Daily Stormer.
Okay.
And it's a far right, I guess, neo-Nazi.
But they were closing them.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
in the U.S., here's the thing: as attorneys, we're taught in law school that everybody's word has to be protected under the First Amendment.
100%.
Even the Skokie, Illinois case involving Nazis wanting to protest in Skokie, Illinois, and you learn that in law school, basic law, that everybody has a right to have a voice. As long as they're not actively trying to tear down the government,
exactly.
They have a right to voice their opinion. Yes. And yet now we've got a government in the United States that doesn't agree with that and wants to shut down the First Amendment. That's what I think is interesting that's going on now. We're seeing a pattern.
And it's government and corporate collusion.
That's
big tech.
You're right.
It's also in the banking and financial industries. I mean, a lot of this was kind of rumors several years ago, but now there are documents coming out. There is evidence that there is collusion, and it's big tech gets a lot of the news, but 100% there is that same type of collusion in the financial industry between the government. And it's formalized.
They actually asked.
FinCEN.
I mean, you have the Biden administration cheering the closing down of gun manufacturers' credit.
Oh yeah.
They're not going after it. They're not doing an investigation with the Justice Department.
Yep.
So it's there's direct and there's indirect approval.
Yeah.
You've got when the king says, I wish that somebody would assassinate this the head of my church. I wish somebody would do that. And then all of a sudden his chief henchmen do it. He can say he didn't want it done, but it was done. This is the way history works.
Defense, right?
We're going through a lot of things, and I wanted to ask you, what have you been, because you're looking at this and you're seeing it like I think a lot of Americans, a lot of citizens around the world, but a lot of Americans now are seeing changes and a lot of darkness that's coming. And what are you doing personally to try and protect yourself?
Good question. So, internationalizing is 100% is a big part of what I'm doing. That's why I'm here, to a large extent. And when I say internationalizing, it's you definitely want to do it the right way, and have kind of a true internationalization. I'll start this off with a quick story of
Okay.
my ruble holdings account. So I travel. I previously have traveled to Russia. I've done business in Russia. I had clients in Russia until very recently, and I had a rubles account, bank account, with an online bank that I could access here or there very easily. And at the height of the, or I guess the initial phase of the sanctions wave, before it was illegal to hold those accounts and whatnot, my bank, that online bank, unilaterally closed out my rubles holdings at, of course, the lowest it was at that point. Um, it's been for decades, and gave me back a pittance of what I had in that account. And that's all complete. I don't have any recourse to that, unfortunately. I mean,
And this was a bank in where?
it's based in the United States. It works globally, but it's yeah,
A U.S. based bank did this
Yeah.
to you.
yeah, I think they have they definitely have a U.S. base. They have bases in Europe as well. It's all over. And yeah, they unilaterally closed my rubles account, forced me to convert it to dollars at the lowest.
And they gave you no recourse.
Nope. I probably could sue them, but I'm not sure. I mean, it would take so
It'll
much.
take much more than the money
yeah.
you
It'd take
lost.
hundreds of thousands of dollars minimum to do that. And yeah, so you're
And
stuck.
they know that when they do it.
Yes, exactly. And of course, once they liquidate it, now the ruble is recovered and is stronger. So wherever my rubles went into their bank, internal bank system, they profited off of stealing from me.
And that's an interesting. It's an interesting point because banks are the power and they are the controllers of all of the finances. And I don't mean the little banks. I mean basically the banking
Yeah.
system
Yeah.
and the central banks.
Yeah.
And by that, then it presents the issue. What do you do about it?
Yeah.
What do you personally think about how do you
Yes.
prepare? How can you, as a little guy, prepare and fight what's being done to you and us all?
Exactly. So I told that story to illustrate how there are wrong ways to internationalize and very suspect ways to do it. That's one of them. Just trusting your holdings in the bank, it can be taken from you 100%, and you can lose it.
And most people don't realize that what's in the bank isn't really theirs anymore.
No.
Talk about that.
Yeah. So it's what fractional reserve banking, right? And it's on
The biggest myth is that when you put your money in the bank, it's your money. It's not. It's no longer your money.
You're a creditor to the bank. You're an unsecured creditor to the bank, right?
Which means that if something happens to the bank, you're the last guy in the
Yeah.
world in the line to get paid.
Fractions of a penny you'll get back.
If you get anything back.
And that has happened. It's probably happened in the U.S. to some extent. I guess we have insurance, but
It
it's happened
happens
internationally.
everywhere.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
happened internationally in the recent past. So what can you do? I'll tell you what I'm doing. So holdings in precious metals is a great way to do it. I'm doing that. I have quite significant holdings from when I started, just adding a little bit here and there, and moving those precious metals into depository holdings or facilities like Atlas Vault. There's a few others, some great ones around the world and in the U.S. I don't have them all in one place, obviously, but strategically moving them to locations that are secure and that are outside of banking or one singular jurisdiction is what I'm doing.
Is having control over something and taking away the third party risk a important part of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So even if you are have strong beliefs and you're never going to do X, Y, or Z, or give up anything to the whomever, a government or a bank, the third party that you're trusting probably will, right? That third party, if they are leaned upon by the federal government, or international, whatever, any other type of national police agency, they will probably turn over your goods. I mean, it happened recently in was it California? There was a vault, I guess, or a deposit box
in California. There was a vault, and the issue there was whether or not everybody's holdings were part of this.
Were suspect.
Now, in that case, the FBI had information or evidence about
the owner,
the owner of the vault being
and that's
involved,
the third party.
and they can go after the owner of the vault,
Yes.
but they went after all of the different everybody that had a box in there, and that was found to be illegal.
Yes.
But the general
took a long time.
it did take a long time, but it was illegal.
Yes.
And that's where they're going. That's what their mindset is.
They're going to lean on third parties, and that's a perfect example of why you need to have trustworthy third parties, whether that's a depository institution or
But here's the
private
difference.
vaults and companies.
In a vault situation, here for example, it's technically the third party is only the real estate.
Yep.
Because the actual box that controls your wealth, whatever you're storing, is you.
Correct. Yeah.
No one has access to that because there's only. So we understand the way the system works.
Yeah.
You have to have a 2-key system.
Yep.
You have a key. The vault has a key, and those keys are required. Both keys are required to be able to open your box.
Yep.
And nobody has access to what you have. So in order for us as a vault to be able to do anything to get you out, let's say, if you didn't pay to keep your storage of wealth in, we would have to get a court order to be able to. It's just an eviction, just like an apartment.
Yep.
We couldn't just go in and break it. In order for us to do anything, we can't use our key because the key doesn't open. It takes 2 keys to open the box, and they're 2 separate keys, and they're both required to open. And then we would have to actually destroy your box to open up the box and be able to access it.
Yep.
That's the way it works. And the difference that we have as well is that we're not part of the banking system.
Correct.
So we're not under the banking regulations. We don't have banking investments. We're not part of a central bank, and we don't do fractional reserve banking.
Yeah.
That's the difference. And you are here essentially when you come with a space at Atlas, for example, here, you are your own central bank because you control it.
Yep, 100%. And that's what attracted me, is having these strict safeguards, having the security, and of course trusting the ownership, right? Getting to know them. And Alejandro here is extremely accessible. He's a great guy. If you come in, he'll probably be the one to give you the tour, right? If you're here.
Yeah.
So great guy to talk to and get to know. And you will, like I did, you'll feel very comfortable very quickly, I think.
A lot of people are asking the question that I'm sure you've asked. You have to find some way to find freedom. You can't beat the government. You can't outwin the government in anything, but you can find your way to some kind of freedom. And the way I look at it is, without the term insurrection, because we're not insurrectionists, we're trying to find a way to just be left alone. To be independent, legally left alone. To have our property that we worked for and we sweated for protected under our own names and by ourselves. So I think that there are ways there, you can go you can buy a farm somewhere and stay, 15,000 miles away from civilization, or you can try and also find something that's out of the system. And that's where I think we're headed, find a way, an ancillary way outside of the system.
Yes.
Because if you're in the system, as you just said earlier, you can be stopped and shut down anytime.
Or anyone around you who you trust can be leaned on and stop you.
Yes. I mean, you got a guy who sells pillows in the United States whose entire business is being actively destroyed because he supported one presidential candidate as opposed to another.
Yep.
That's what banana republics used to do.
Oh, yeah.
But we're doing it in the United States.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you find that way to get outside of the system while being in the system? Because you're still in the system.
Yeah. So the rationale, I guess, that I take, or the strategy I take is kind of biblical, right? It's maybe live in the system, but not of the system. Don't be of the system, but you can reside adjacent to it or in it or whatever.
Be in the world, but not of it.
Exactly. And so that means, yes, I travel internationally. I go through borders. I have bank accounts, right? And I pay taxes, right? So, but that doesn't mean that I don't take steps to protect myself. And I've always been fond of the term sovereign individual or sovereign individualism, and that's the idea that you are responsible for yourself and that you will take actions to protect yourself and to do your own things without requiring, the assistance or or necessarily the directives of others, whether that's an institution or the government or whomever. You are sovereign. You take care of yourself, and you have the freedom of action, right?
To the extent you can.
Yes, exactly, right. Yeah.
I mean, let's.
Can't be. Yeah.
Well, it's and you know, most people, if you know what's happening right now in the world, and it's going very quickly. Please, people, if you're paying attention to the news, get into what's going on right now with the Netherlands, with Sri Lanka. Those are not far away things to the United States. That's the Green New Deal, folks.
Yep.
You're watching the Green New Deal eat you alive right now.
Yeah.
Germany, and by the way, the Germans
showers now.
The Germans are about to go through a horrible experience because of central planning.
Yeah.
Because of central planning, we are. It's not green. It's not carbons anymore. Now it's nitrogen.
Yeah.
We're talking about basic science. It's now the enemy of civilization. Nitrogen that is necessary for plants to grow and stay green is now illegal.
Nitrogen is fertilizer. That's what
yes,
the ground.
And so is potash,
Yep.
which, by the way, is something in Ukraine. And we have a potash, which it's a critical element for farmers to grow.
Yep.
But this is all part of the Green New Deal. Sri Lanka has been bankrupted because of the Green New Deal and central planning. Yeah. This president that is now in hiding, he's in hiding because of that very reason.
They're just the first, too.
Yeah, well, they were the experiment.
Yeah.
And there are the World Economic Forum, I believe it was 2 years ago, said that by this year, Sri Lanka would be the foremost leader in the Green New Deal because they were going to do everything that they were told to do. And they did. And now they're bankrupt.
Very sad.
Now they're bankrupt. Well, they're doing it to the Netherlands, to Holland,
yep.
which is a very important farming source for Europe and sometimes even for the United States.
Extremely efficient there, yeah.
And they're destroying the farmers. They are now destroying the American farmers, and it's active. And by the way, there is no accident that Bill Gates is buying a lot of land, farmland in the United States, because that's part of the Green New Deal.
Yeah. I think internationally too, like Brazil and Argentina.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. The first thing that the new communist president of Colombia said during his acceptance speech was, "We are going to make Colombia green." It's one of the greenest countries in the world, by the way. Right. We're going to make Colombia green. And what he meant was he is going to follow the orders of the World Economic Forum. Folks, this isn't conspiracy theory. They're telling you this on their website. They're proudly announcing these things.
Yep.
So again, if you see it coming, if you see the signs of the times, you're kind of foolish if you don't take any action on your own.
Yeah, and find folks like yourself, or in network with them, right? Or find folks here through institutions or businesses that are supportive of you, right? And who understand the reality in the world, like Atlas Vaults. And there's others out there you can network with, which I don't know, maybe we can put links or whatever. I'm happy to direct you to, of course. But yeah, networking.
Because we're about creating networks.
Exactly.
We encourage networking so that we can legally create a friendship base with people of like mind, so that we have more strength.
Yes.
So that we can unite to say we're trying to survive. We're not really trying to do anything except survive.
Yeah, and it's not even, I know some people will take kind of that mindset into violence, but it is nothing like that. It's nothing about networking for the purposes of economics, right? To be truly independent and truly sovereign, you need to have your own economic base, right? In network, and it eventually becomes a dual economy. I mean, I studied some of this in university, which it's quite fascinating to me, but that's the goal. Violence will never be the answer. The answer is creating jobs, creating businesses, creating institutions and networks that are like-minded and that support each other and can be independent of the system. And that's happening. It's happening all over the world right now.
And one of the ways
technology's there.
One of the ways you can get out of the system is to not be completely in the dollar and the euro.
Exactly.
And how do you do that? Except, I mean,
So it used to be well, the way I used to do it was having accounts, right, with denominated in certain currencies with banks. Now, really, I'm having to go to physical holdings or go to bank account holdings in those countries and hold their own national currency.
And one of the strongest ways to do it is to have gold and silver
Yeah, yeah,
in your own possession.
yes, yes,
In your own possession, not in paper that's held by a third party somewhere.
yeah.
Not don't buy GLD and think
Yeah.
that you actually own gold,
Yeah.
because you don't. That's a piece of paper that's being transacted by in the securities exchange world,
Yeah.
and it's not really yours. All you have is a piece of paper.
Yep.
But if you have gold or silver in your hands, in your possession, no one is going to take that from you with a click of a mouse. Okay,
Yes.
nobody's going to be able to say that's gone, because it's not there. It's in your hands.
Yep.
You know, there's an example of somebody found a few $1,000s in 1930s currency.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And they said that money was worth, it was only like the $30,000, but it was worth like $250,000
Yeah.
in actual money.
The
From
face value was what, 30, and then
30,000 face value, but it would have bought 300 or 250,000 as if in that time.
yeah.
So what it shows you is what is happening to currency, what is happening to paper money. If you have the actual gold from 1930, that gold still buys you the 300,000.
Yeah.
It doesn't buy you 30,000 that it did back in 1930, because the gold actually has the value.
Yeah.
So you've got to start looking at things that keep you independent of the currency system.
Yeah.
And that's what we're about, and that's why we're trying to network with people, and Rocky's part of that network. And I think what's important is that we talk about solutions. And one of those solutions is get yourself into something that you hold in your hands.
Yes.
Gold and silver. And you know, we're big fan. We're fans of the blockchain.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
We're fans of using
You gotta be
Bitcoin. Yes, yes, you do.
Yeah.
Because
But the underlying technology is
we'll go back to the reason. If you look at Binance or any of the other wallets,
Yeah.
what do they tell you in the fine print?
It's not yours.
They're just like banks.
Yep.
Yeah, they tell you if
Custodial holding.
custodial holdings means that if they go bankrupt, and that's happening in many cases,
Yeah.
if they go bankrupt, your holdings are part of the creditor's booty, which means you're just like in a bank. It means that you are an unsecured creditor,
Yes.
and you wait last. That's what that means. Unsecured creditor means you get last.
Yep.
Everybody else that is owed money by the bank that has security, they get their first hands at whatever there is in assets.
Yeah.
You're last. And so whatever you think is safe is really just an illusion. So, you know, these are the things that you need to always remember. You can get into blockchain and cryptocurrency, and it's great because you can move it.
Yes.
You can have access. But remember, the danger is always the third party risk.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that money being kept? What can happen if the wallet goes bankrupt? You know, there is no third party risk here in terms of that, because nobody has access. There are no creditors that have access to what you have.
Yes. Yeah. There's no back door.
No.
The ownership doesn't change at Atlas Vaults or any.
No, and
any
not even
real
that, but
secure vault.
the reason banks make investments using the bank, that doesn't happen at Atlas, and that doesn't happen with an independent vault.
Exactly.
And whatever happens with your interest is separate from anything that has to do with Atlas.
Yep.
So there is no third party involvement. So with Binance Binance is doing, or I don't want to use Binance by itself, all the different
Like centralized exchanges.
exchanges.
Like whether Celsius was out there.
Those
Yeah.
exchanges have their separate rules, but they owe money, and they first, if you look at every single one of them, they have to tell you in the fine print that if something happens, you are still an unsecured creditor. And you are the only thing that you can have to protect your own interests. And when you own your own gold and your own silver or whatever wealth you have in your private possession, in your private vault, nobody has access to that.
Yeah.
That's not ownership of Atlas. That's not with us. We can't.
Yep.
We can't hypothecate it.
Yeah.
We can't mortgage it.
Yeah, and so I would just round out by saying, so start moving into physical, like action steps, I guess, for it. Start moving into physical. It can start with an ounce here and there or whatever, a couple grams. And then I would look towards placing those physical holdings in appropriate storage places, right? Don't use a deposit box at a bank for a multitude of
Why
reasons.
not?
Okay, you want to get
Why
in?
not?
So because the banks, they actually still have access to it, and beyond that, there's I don't remember the law or exactly, but I believe it is still a custodial holding.
Yes,
yeah,
yes, it is.
from what I
And they
seen.
also, and you could also, it could also be considered one of the assets of the bank.
Yes, yeah, exactly, and that's happened. I can't recall specific instances in my mind, but I know it has happened, and I've read about that. But yeah, a deposit box in a bank is not appropriate. Look for appropriate storage, private gold facilities or precious metal facilities and vaults. And then, once you start with that, as you start building up, the next level will be internationalizing those holdings. Places like
Americans have a big problem with travel. They don't.
They're very.
They don't.
We have our own bias, right?
We have a bias as Americans about
Yeah.
jurisdictions being
Yeah.
keeping things away. But why did you pick Panama?
So Panama for me was business and personal reasons. Personal were probably the biggest, but the business reasons are that it's a very easy kind of a baby step for Americans. It may not be the most secure, I guess, ultimately in the future, but for an American who has some trepidations about going international or taking that first step, Panama is the place to be. It's a baby step, into that.
One of the things that people don't realize is Panama is also, and I don't say this, I say this as a happily and unhappily, because Panama is protected by the United States.
Yes, yeah, right.
Panama has no military, and if anything happened in Panama, the U.S. would have to step in.
Yeah.
Remember, Panama has the most important trade route in the world, which is the Panama Canal. And even though they technically gave away the Panama Canal, they are protecting it because that would stop all world economic commerce.
Yes.
So it's more important than the Suez Canal.
Yeah.
And the United States must protect it, and that's why it does protect it.
Yep.
And so one of the things that makes Panama very stable is that it's very hard for it to have an extreme government.
Yes. Yeah.
Because the U.S. will step in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that's the population. The trend is that it flips right, left every election. It's just
it doesn't matter. It really doesn't.
It's all very moderate, but even though the U.S. protects Panama, I will say that Panama does have good relations with other nations in the world.
Yes, it does.
Like China. I mean, China and Panama have been in discussions with a free trade agreement for a few years now, working out the details. Panama already has a free trade agreement with the United States, and I mean, imagine the economic powerhouse Panama could be with a free trade agreement with both of those countries.
Well, something that most people don't realize is that Panama also has tax treaties.
Yes. Yep.
With places like the United States.
Yeah, a lot of countries.
And Switzerland.
Yep.
Which means that when you buy, when you bring in gold or silver from the United States, you have a major tax break under treaty.
Yeah. And
so that is something that a lot of people don't understand and don't realize. Also, for tax purposes, Panama is very liberal with international transactions.
Yeah.
And it's very pro-business.
Yes.
And that's one of the great things about having a business in Panama and having some wealth stored in Panama, because Panama is and has been pro-business.
Yeah. One thing I like about Panama as well, that relates to being pro-business, is that they are solvent because of the Panama Canal.
Yeah, they're very rich.
They are, yeah. and probably they squander a certain portion of it anyways. But they are not a destitute country. They have plenty of funds coming in from the canal. They've monetized it very well since the U.S. left, which is a good thing.
Most people don't realize that the average the average ship pays a minimum of $100,000 to cross the canal.
It's a huge amount.
That's a minimum.
If you want to jump the line and go fast, it's a multiple of that. So
yeah, so it's a very big economic resource for the country.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, if you stop the Panama Canal, you pretty much stop all world commerce.
Yeah. Yep.
And the United States would have no choice but to act.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just an example of that would be look at the problems that California ports have been having.
Yes.
And imagine there's a huge portion of trade that goes through the canal that avoids the California ports and their problems. If the canal got shut down, they would all have to go through the California ports, or maybe even through Mexico. They don't have the capacity for it. It won't happen. Everything will grind to a halt. So
yeah, and just the Suez Canal is critical for world commerce.
Yeah.
Imagine the Panama Canal, because there's a lot more going on in the Panama Canal than there is in Suez.
Yes. 100%.
So, those are the reasons I think that that people need to consider what's going on and take and kind of get past their biases.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Panama. So I mentioned kind of as baby steps. The English level is very good here. It's
by the way, what currency do we use here in Panama?
They use the dollar. It's dollarized, which is good and bad. Right? You won't have transaction costs with having to convert currency, but you may have to take another step to get away from the dollar.
It's bad because it causes the inflation is higher.
Yes.
And so the people feel more inflation here because unlike the United States, they can't make their own dollars, and the U.S. does.
Yep.
So the U.S. feels less inflation than other countries that use the dollar. Yeah. But that's the bad aspect of it. But the good aspect is, if you're an American and you don't like a lot of change, well, you also have a very pro-American and friendly area to stay in. And by the way, most people don't realize, but Panama City is almost identical to Miami.
Yeah, it's international too. I mean, so my wife she's a U.S. resident and will be a citizen, but she was born elsewhere. In her community, they have a very vibrant community here in Panama City. So it's international.
There's a big Jewish Orthodox community here. There's an Arab community.
Yeah.
There are Greeks here.
Yeah.
There's a Greek community that's very tight. So it's all very it's a little mini U.S.
There's even an Italian community because Italy and Panama had strong relations for a long time. But so it's international. You'll feel very.
How long does it take you from Texas to fly here?
3 hours, maybe if we have to go around a storm.
From Miami, it's 2.5 hours.
Yeah, it's negligible. It's actually closer to come to Panama City than New York City.
It really is. And it's very, very comfortable. To do and to use and to utilize the resources here.
Yeah, all the amenities that we have in the U.S. they have here. Of
course, everything. It's still Spanish.
Yeah, primarily.
But a lot of people, most of the people, especially involved in tourism,
business,
they speak English and business.
Yeah.
The lawyers speak English.
Yep. The banks, the top-notch banks, they all speak English at that.
Yeah.
At the level.
And by the way, at Atlas, we offer the ability to help and introduce you to all the necessary professionals you would want.
Yep. I've connected with some of their professionals for doing due diligence, potential business acquisitions, and it's been top-notch.
Lawyers and accountants and anything you would need here, because we believe in helping out with those details, because people who come from a different country, they're not going to know.
Yep.
So, and your practice primarily is in what?
So international trade, so two portions: international trade, import and export compliance. We help either any kind of goods going in or out of the U.S. We do all the compliance measures and things like that, paperwork.
So you make sure everybody stays legal.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want your goods seized at the border or to violate export controls, which are very important nowadays with the growing number of sanctions. And then the other practice area is franchise law. So we help folks either start a franchise or buy into a franchise like that. So, Yeah.
Well, Rocky, it's been great.
Absolutely.
And maybe we can do this again.
I'm sure we will.
All right.
So it was great chatting.
Thank you. Thank you,
Take
Rob.
care. All right. That was excellent.